What's up, FasCats? Frank Overton here. Some of you know me as the Big Cat. 20 years ago, I introduced sweet spot training as a smarter, more time efficient way to build your power and endurance. Since then, sweet spot has helped hundreds of thousands of cyclists and coaches build their base, increase their FTP, and get faster on just 4 to 12 hours of training per week. And in this training tip, I'm going to explain exactly how much sweet spot training you should do and when. Then at the end, I'll give you the exact amounts based on what kind of cycling you do, whether that's road, gravel, mountain biking, fondos, centuries, triathlons, cyclocross, or just riding for fitness. And you'll learn how to structure sweet spot training through the season so you can ride faster, farther, and stronger. While you're watching, drop a comment below and let me know what you're training for. I read every one, and it helps me tailor these training tips for riders just like you. If you're listening on the podcast, head over to our YouTube channel to watch the full video with charts and graphs that'll help you visualize everything I'm talking about. A quick shout out to our partners who support the CoachCat subscribers with the exclusive discounts: Whoop, Panache, Hunt Wheels, Never Second, and Glow. You can grab those codes right inside the app. Just head over to your profile, partners discounts, to get your Go Faster deals. All right, thanks everyone for being here and watching, and let's dive into what determines how much sweet spot training you should do. For starters, it's based on two key factors: the time of the year and your goal event. And as for the time of the year, we think in terms of, are you in your base and build phase, or are you in your in-season phase? And then for your goal in an event, we think in terms of specificity. Is it a gravel race, a road, crit, Ironman? And we really look at the power demands of these events to help you understand how much sweet spot you should do. Then, with those two designations, we zoom in and look even further at your ability level, your age, and where you're at in your annual training plan continuum. Like, are you just starting your training for next year? Are you getting ready for a race in 10 weeks? Or are you building towards peak form? We're not saying you should be sweet spot training every day, nor year round. Your training plan should guide you. And that's why we built CoachCat, to tell you exactly how much sweet spot you should do and when, based on your season, your goals, and your recovery. Most athletes benefit from 2 to 3 sweet spot workouts per week, but the volume and the structure change as you move throughout your season. Let's move on to calculating sweet spot volume. We take the number of intervals times the duration of the interval, and that equals the total sweet spot time. For example, 3 by 5 minutes equals 15 minutes of sweet spot. 4 by 10 equals 40 minutes. Most amateur FasCat athletes gradually build from small to large. For example, 3 by 10 is 30 minutes, 4 by 9 is 36, 3 by 15 is 45, on up to 2 by 25, that's 50 minutes of sweet spot training. And these amounts, 30, 36, 50, they're referred to as time in zone, or TIZ. Time in zone is a key metric for structuring your sweet spot workouts and volume so your training plan can apply progression. By gradually increasing your time in zone, you can create a new training stimulus each workout that drives more mitochondrial density, more aerobic adaptations, and ultimately a bigger, better base capable of achieving higher FTPs, greater endurance, and more durability. On the weekends, we prescribe sweet spot in such a fashion that we give it to you in time and zone. So for example, a sweet spot OTS ride where you will be challenged to do, let's say, 200 OTS, and we will say, in order to achieve that 200 OTS, you're going to need to be able to do an hour's worth of sweet spot by spending any combination of that 1 hour in the time and zone. So if you want to do 20 minutes, followed by 8 minutes, followed by 15 minutes, as long as it adds up to an hour and you achieve that OTS, that's a successful day. And it allows for more flexibility and more fun. Let's move on to talking about sweet spot data and what metrics to watch. The workouts and the rides you do in your training plan tell you how much sweet spot training you should do, but then your data provides scientific proof that you've done the work and that you've done it right. There's 4 key metrics our coaches and CoachCat look at so we can tell you exactly how much sweet spot you've done. Remember, everyone is unique based on how well you recover from these workouts, which we'll get into next. The first metric I've already alluded to, it's OTS, optimized training stress. OTS tells you how much stress a rod places on your body. Sweet spot rods generate more OTS than zone 2, which makes them incredibly efficient for building fitness, especially when you have limited training time. Your training plan has total weekly hours, but also total OTS. Watch how your weekly OTS accumulates to make sure you're training enough, but not too much. And I'll give you a real world example. Say you only have 8 hours a week to train, and you're just doing 8 hours from October through March. How are you going to apply progression? Well, the way that you do that is a little bit of sweet spot in October and then a lot of sweet spot in February and March. And we can measure that in OTS. So while you may be doing 8, week after week after week, your OTS is incrementally going up because you're achieving more stress by applying that sweet spot as a greater time in zone. The second way we measure how much sweet spot you've been doing is by your level, formerly chronic training load, CTL, training load. Level measures how much you've been riding lately, and by sweet spotting, you're going to be able to increase your level more with the limited time you have to train. As your level increases, so does your fitness and eventually your FTP. That's one of the key goals of your training plan is to steadily drive up your level over time, and then we use sweet spot to do that more effectively than you can with zone 2. Behind the scenes, level is calculated using a rolling 42-day average of your daily OTS values, and it's really how much have you been riding lately. So pay attention to your level and use sweet spot training to drive that level up. The third metric we use is streak. Your streak measures how consistently you've been following your training plan, including your rest days. Streaking is not specific to sweet spot, but here's the truth. All this sweet spot in the world in precisely the right amounts, it won't help you if you're not consistent. So by streaking week after week, that's what turns smart training into real results. I myself have a 102-day streak and I'm level 68. The fourth and most important metric is FTP, your functional threshold power. If your sweet spot intervals are starting to feel easier, guess what? Your FTP has gone up, which is the goal, and thereby you know your sweet spot training is working. By using these 4 metrics together, you'll be able to track your improvement and adjust your plan as you go along to keep progressing without overreaching. Now that you know how to calculate your sweet spot time and zone and which data metrics to track, let's talk about how much sweet spot you should actually be doing based on the time of the year and then the type of cycling you're training for. Before we dive into the disciplines and sweet spot recommendations, let's start with the base phase. This is the period, the time of year after you've lifted weights and it's before your interval work. It's preseason, often described as off-season. For most Northern Hemisphere athletes, that's December through April, maybe even into May, depending on your local weather and race calendar. This is your off-season training, and the primary goal here should be to build the biggest aerobic base you possibly can, irregardless of your discipline, with the limited time that you have to train. And the reason why, the bigger your base, the higher your potential is for power output, endurance, and durability later on in the season. Even if you're targeting short events like criteriums and cyclocross, even track racing, the athletes who lay down a bigger base consistently perform better when it counts. So, how much you can do depends on how much time you have to train. If you got 14, 16, 18 hours like the pros, you're going to go off and do a ton of training. You're going to build up a big base. Life is going to be great. But this video is for us masters athletes. We have 4 hours. We have 6, 8, 10. That's it. And so building your base comes down to how much time you have to train and how well you apply sweet spot within that time. And as coaches, we start by asking the question, how much do you have to train each week? Does it change? Is it variable? But for the purposes of this video, let's say you have 8 hours to train each week. That might look like 1 hour rides on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 3 hours Saturday, and 2 hours on Sunday. Now that gives us the framework to apply the sweet spot within those hours efficiently. And the way that we apply sweet spot is our fatigue-dependent training plan design model, FDTPDM. Go find the training tip on our podcast and our website. But the way that we apply sweet spot is progressively, and we start with doing sweet spot workouts on Tuesdays and Saturdays. So week 1 may be very beginner, 3x5, 3x10. on Tuesdays, and then you may do like 30 minutes of freestyle sweet spot on Saturdays. And then in week 2, you'll progress up. You maybe do like 3x10 on Tuesday and an hour's worth on Saturday. And then again, it depends on what level plan you're at. You may be at a more beginner level or a more intermediate level. Week 2, the progression continues. You go from 3x10 to 4x9, and then you go from 45 minutes on Saturday to 1 hour on Saturday, and so on and on and up. And the key is start gradually, progress gradually, because you don't want to apply too much too soon. Because again, you got plenty of time to build your base. Our 4-part Sweet Spot Training Plan series lays this out for you day by day, week by week, gradually building you up to some pretty big honking sweet spot rides 2 to 3 times per week with 90 to 120 minutes or more on Saturdays. So a lot of funny comments that we get from athletes when they start a Sweet Spot Training Plan is, hey, coach, this feels easy. And we chuckle. And then we say, well, go look into like week 9, week 11, week 12. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. But the key to being able to do that big honking training volume of sweet spot later on in the training plan is getting the adaptations from doing a little bit of sweet spot. You adapt to that, you apply more, you adapt to that, you apply more. It's like walking up the stairs. So while you're figuring out how much sweet spot training you should do, listen to your body. Trust the plan, but listen to your body. Now, everyone is different, and every morning we give you a recovery score. It's how you feel to adjust your time and zone, and then to add or subtract sweet spot as needed. If you're following your plan, you're going to be fine, because after 20 years of prescribing sweet spot training, I have to not be humble and say, I've figured out the right amount of sweet spot training you should do. We've put it in the plan. If you want to take the guesswork out, just follow the plan. Do the workouts, focus on recovery and nutrition. The athletes that tend to, tweak and adjust, maybe get a little too impatient, those are the ones that become the group ride hero or lack that consistency. So word to the wise, play the long game. Don't ramp up too fast too soon. You don't want to be the group ride hero in February. If you edit the plans and you do too much sweet spot at once, you'll plateau before the season even starts. You won't even have anywhere to go up from. But really, our plans are designed with periodization and progression in mind to guide you to that next phase of training in the perfect amount of time. So in short, use sweet spot to build the biggest base you can preseason, regardless of your discipline. But then once you're in the season, that's when you start to tailor how much sweet spot you should do based on the specific type of riding and the discipline of which you want to improve and compete in. So let's start with those disciplines that do not benefit from a lot of in-season sweet spot training. And those are time trial, criterium, cyclocross, track, hill climbs, and any Strava KOM or PR that's less than an hour. None of those disciplines are performed at sweet spot intensities, and therefore not much of your in-season training should include sweet spot. Yeah, we said that. Now, let's talk about road. How much sweet spot you should do for your road racing depends on how the race will be won and what kind of rider are you. If you plan to try to get into a breakaway or win from a long solo move, or even if you're a domestique pulling for your team for hours, sweet spot is for you. And let's give you an example. Take stage 9 of this year's Tour de France. Mathieu van der Poel and Jonas Rickart, they were off the front for nearly 174 Ks. Rickart reportedly rode at nearly 3.5 hours in sweet spot, and that was after he did a lot of threshold and VO2 max work. Another example, Matthew Hayman, he won the 2016 Paris-Roubaix with 5 hours of sweet spot, and that's what made the difference. The same goes for FasCat athlete Timmy Dugan in the 2012 Tour of California. He pulled day after day for Peter Sagan, controlling the breakaways. Then he rested. 2 weeks later, he won the U.S. Pro from a breakaway. And then a month after that, homeboy rode a 4-hour breakaway in the Olympic road race in London. Super proud of that. You cannot do that with Zone 2 training, my fellow Fast Cats. Now, conversely, that's if you're going to win from a breakaway. If you're a sprinter, really, you just need to be able to do the amount of sweet spot that Peloton's going to force you to do to stay in the pack. And that typically can be 1 to 2 hours at a time. Maybe think about an hour at the beginning when the break is forming, and then an hour at the end when it's really ramping up for the sprint. So if you're a sprinter, really not too much sweet spot training. You might be able to derive a lot of your sweet spot adaptations from your preseason. Climbers need to be able to do a lot of sweet spot, especially for races and events that have more than 1 hour of cumulative time spent climbing, which is usually the case for races and events that have more than 5,000 feet of climbing. Start by including 1 hour of sweet spot during a longer ride, say 3 to 4 to 5 hours, and then aim for being able to do 1.5 to 2 hours of sweet spot also in that long ride, and then progress to being able to do a greater portion of that long ride in sweet spot, all the way up to 2.5 to 3 hours during your ride. And you can do this in a variety of ways. In a freestyle OTS sweet spot ride, you can do this on a group ride if the group ride is going at the right pace. And then you can also do this on your race simulation rides where there is a structured time and zone target. For mountain bikers, it kind of depends on the type of mountain bike racing you're competing in. Cross-country mountain biking has very little sweet spot, and therefore very little of your training needs to include sweet spot once the first half of your season is underway. But don't get me wrong, as a cross-country mountain biker, you'll do tons and tons of sweet spot pre-season, but once you built your base and then you moved on, very little sweet spot training. Now, marathon mountain biking is a completely different animal. We're talking events like Marathon Mountain Bike Nationals, which they just had in Roanoke this past week, but also ultra events like Leadville, the Lutsen 99er, Park City Point to Point, Kohutta, just to name a few. Sweet spot's going to be your bread and butter for these bad boys, and you want to work up in training to match the expected sweet spot you'll be doing in the race. And if you can't match it, you just want to try to do as much in training as you can, because these races will be determined by who can sweet spot the most and the longest. Moving on, gravel racing is all about sweet spot. Think of gravel racing like a long solo breakaway. So the recommendations for the roadies apply. Start with 60 minutes of sweet spot work, but work your way up to 120 or 180 minutes of time in sweet spot zone. And that's during your 5 to 7 hour races. Now, the pros, they're spending probably more than 70% of their time in zone at sweet spot. And when we say more than 120%, we mean push yourself. This is just like the ultra and the marathon mountain bike training. Push yourself to achieve as much sweet spot as you can in your training simulation rides, whether that's 2 hours when you first start off to being able to do 2.5 to be able to do 3 hours or more. Essentially, in these training simulation rides, you want a sweet spot until you can't sweet spot anymore, your legs get tired, and then you keep going in high zone 2 because that's what you'll have to do in your race. So my coach's takeaway is, as with any type of training, you want to start small, apply progression gradually over weeks and weeks, and then you want to align how much sweet spot training you should do with your current fitness, the time of the year, base versus in season, and then your age, which determines the amount of recovery you can achieve from all this sweet spot training. And then finally, once you get down to brass tacks and close to competition, the intensity and the duration of your target event determines how much sweet spot you should be doing during your training. And as always, listen to your body, use your data to track your improvement, namely your OTS, your level, your streak, and your FTP. And then talk with your coach or the CoachCat AI to adjust the amount of sweet spot training intensity you are doing based on your data and how you are feeling. Whew. All right. If that felt like a lot and you're ready to take the guesswork out of your sweet spot training, here are 3 additional ways. Number 1, use the CoachCat app to get daily personalized sweet spot workouts. Number 2, follow one of our sweet spot plans that are included in the CoachCat app. Or number 3, if you want expert eyes and you want to talk to a coach about sweet spot training, check out our one-on-one coaching for an ultra personalized sweet spot training plan design and data analysis. Drop your sweet spot questions below and give this video a like if you found helpful. I'd love it if you subscribe so you don't miss our next training tip, which is going to be on the various styles of sweet spot training we use to help athletes ride faster, increase their power output, and ultimately achieve their goals. Thanks again for watching. It's an honor and a privilege that you do. You know what to do. Work hard, ride fast, have fun, and as always, FTF. Pete.